Hi everybody. Today we're going to talk about business intelligence, analytics, exception management, and how that can help you increase your margins. So we're going to start off with a couple of slides that talk about who we are at I.B.I.S, and then we're going to go straight to the presentation. I.B.I.S has been in business for over 24 years. We are a Microsoft certified partner. We have been implementing AX solutions as well as GP solutions, CRM solutions, and SharePoint solutions for all of this time, and we have a large group of consultants that are out there with the experience and the training to be able to deliver these products. One of the items that we're very pleased about and very proud is in our certifications, we are a Microsoft Global Independent Software Vendor. That means that we are the chosen partner from Microsoft on the advanced supply chain software, and that basically we are part of their AX group, the development group. We work with them to find out what are the next releases that are coming out and how our solution is going to fit to those releases, and as well as how we go to market with Microsoft in a guaranteed amount of time to certify our code and to make sure that everything is AX specific code as well. So now we're going to get started on a couple of slides. The first one is, before we start looking at increasing profits and so forth, we have to understand that there are certain requirements and concerns. The next two slides, the first one is going to cover business specific concerns. And looking at some of these issues here, you're looking at brick and mortar closures, you're looking at price competition, you're looking at sales execution, cash flow support, customers selling their businesses, how's that going to affect you, how to compete with the nationals. A lot of these are questions, basically, is how am I going to get my business to manage these situations, but also allow us to grow in a competitive fashion. For a lot of these, what you need is a way of getting to that information. This is a lot of information that needs to be compiled and then made available and presented in a way that makes sense. That's where you start running into issues, because not all systems can, first of all, capture the information, secondly, compile it properly, and thirdly, present it in such a way that it makes sense for you to start managing and working with the results and get to the next level you want to get at. Industry-wide concerns are pretty much the same thing. I mean, the specific business concerns are one thing, then you're part of an industry, and you're still looking at things like, how are the big box retailers affecting your business? How's your growth versus generalists? Is it going to be a generalist type growth in the industry, or do you want to be a special type distributors? Manufacturing, distribution, communication, information has to go back and forth. Market consolidation, how's that affecting you? Material inflation, how's that affecting you? Amazon, Google, how are they affecting you in the industry? And are they stealing any of your business? How are you competing against them? Again, this is a lot of information that needs to be captured, first of all, needs to be consolidated, and then needs to be presented in a way that you can actually digest it and make decisions from. That's where business intelligence and analytics come from. I wanted to get a description of the actual definition just to make sure that we're all heading in the same direction. Business intelligence is basically a set of theories, methodologies, architectures, and technologies that you're going to use to take all of that raw data and transform it in a way that you have information that you can use for your business. That's extremely important, because just having data that doesn't add any value to anything. You got to be able to use that data in order for you to turn around and make decisions based on that data. BI basically handles huge amounts of data, and it's all unstructured data in many cases, and then it turns around and helps you identify, develop, and hopefully, the idea is to create new business opportunities for your company. In simple words, BI makes interpreting voluminous data friendly. That's basically all we're saying. There's a lot of information. Every account, every sales order will generate tons of information. Every returned item will generate tons of information. Any new customer with an invoice or a purchase that takes place generates tons of information. Shipments generate tons of information. It all needs to make sense. Otherwise, it's just noise. And you can't manage a business based on noise. Which brings us to the next slide, which talks about exception management. There's two types of systems in a company. There's the formal and informal system. The formal system is what we say we're going to do in order to generate revenue. This is how we capture our customers. These are the vendors we have. This is how we negotiate with them. This is how we receive an order. This is how we put it through our system. This is how we pick, pack, ship, invoice, get paid. Then there's the informal system, which is how we actually get it out there. Because in some cases, the two do not match with each other. So exception management basically applies to general business applications and business intelligence applications. So there's two areas that it applies in, and that's where you start looking at what do I have as what I think is the way I do business, and how do I really do business, because that'll generate a lot of issues. General business exceptions are cases that deviate from the normal behavior. In other words, this is how I get stuff out, something happened, so I have an exception. Okay? Once you get those exceptions, they need to be cared and addressed in a very unique manner, which is not part of the norm. That's the whole idea behind the term exception, how to deal with it. And it's usually not a computer that's going to solve that. That's somebody who understands the business, understands both the formal and informal system, and they're going to make sure that it gets fixed. And the fix, if done properly, is not a one-time fix for this issue, but is a fix that actually converts that informal approach that caused the exception and makes it a formal approach that now will be managed as a normal process and won't require intervention the next time. Okay? Some of these causes could be process deviations, could be external deviations, poor quality business rules, malformed data, it could be anything. In other words, I thought I had inventory, but I don't have inventory, so how am I going to get this out? So those are the areas that would be affected by that. And management by exception here is basically the practice of investigating, resolving, and handling any of these occurrences using the right staff and the right software tool. Because again, the software will manage the normal. The people, the humans, have to get involved in managing the exceptions. So a lot of these exceptions and a lot of these changes are coming about because of distribution trends and challenges. We all see what's happening as far as market trends are concerned. We're looking at demanding customers. Actually, we're all demanding customers because we're all looking at immediate gratification, instant gratification, and that's why we order on the internet. That's why we use multiple ways of placing orders in order to get what we need. And we're very demanding about how much it's going to cost, the quality we're going to get, and so forth and so on. I don't want it in red, I want it in blue. You don't have it in blue, I don't place the order. That kind of stuff. Increased competition. The supply chain, as you see from some following slides, is getting more and more complex, of course. Consolidation, as I said, pressure from Amazon supply. And then you've got the internal issues, such as demand, pricing, and margins that you have to deal with. Obviously, you want to get the most as far as profits are concerned, as far as increasing your margin. You have to increase operational efficiencies. You have to work on building brand loyalty and customer satisfaction. There's so much that you have to deal with internally as far as the operations and the challenges that causes as well as you're trying to increase your profits and manage your business. Now, when we're talking about complexity of supply chain, this is a slide that basically shows a global supply chain. Quite complex, obviously. You've got vendors, you've got customers, you've got DCs, you've got air freight, you've got vessel, you've got train, you've got by truck, you've got by courier. There's all these customers that are spread all over geographic locations. There's all these vendors that are spread all over geographic locations. All of that needs to be managed, and that is definitely driving a big change in supply chain, but it's also having a major effect on margins and profits, because if you don't handle that well, every time you make a mistake, you lose points. Every time you lose points, it comes right off the bottom line. Now, some people will say, well, I don't have that big a supply chain, so I don't have the same issues. Well, there's an internal supply chain. You basically have the same issues, just on a smaller scale. So technically, it's all relative. If you make a mistake and your inventory is incorrect and you're out of parts, but you committed to ship same day to a customer, well, you still have a cost that's going to affect your margins, because you might jump in have a taxi go pick it up from Bob's place 15 blocks away, then bring it back to your office or deliver it directly to the end user, to your customer. Well, those are costs that weren't planned for, and therefore affect the margins that you're going to be realizing out of this specific process at this point. Now, this is also an exception, so you're going to have to deal with that. Why was my inventory wrong? So when we get into that, one of the things that we're still going to look at is visibility. Why do you need visibility? Well, you need visibility to manage your customer expectations. The more the customers change, the more you have to change. As your customers change and you change, how does that affect your margins? Don't just do a change for the sake of change without looking at your margins, because you may find out that it's really costing you a lot more than you were willing to pay. And sometimes the retention of those customers is not something that you are capable or willing to do at that cost. Vendor expectations, same thing. Vendors have a bunch of requirements. It's not always true that the customer makes all the decisions and the customer is always right. Vendors tend to have a lot of demands on their parts as well, because their parts are something the customer wants, and therefore you're going to do business with them a certain way. You have to identify how that will affect your margins. Internal expectations. If your people in the warehouse are always getting wrong information when it comes to pick, pack, ship, well, all of that comes back. Every time that comes back and you have to make some changes, there's a cost. That cost affects your margins. Competitive pressures, value add pressure. What are you going to do in order to compete with the other distributor that sells the same product you do? You're going to add value. Well, that's all great. What's that value going to cost? Is that a value that the market is willing to accept? And are you going to absorb that value, or are you going to pass it on? Depending on the decision, no matter which one, it may affect the amount of orders you're going to get, because you might lose some customers when you add that value because they don't see that value and they don't want to pay for it. Or you may decide that you're not going to add the value, you're going to compete head on, which may cause competitive pressures and bring the prices down. So no matter which way you look at it, it affects margins. Change management, collaboration, getting the information out there so that you can manage properly. Basically, everything that you do in a business will affect margins if you sit down and look at how this will allow you to be represented in the business when you make that change, when you look at those situations. There was a book that was written by Jonathan Burns, who's a senior lecturer at MIT, and the name of the book is called Islands of Profit in the Sea of Red Ink. Basically, after many, many years of studies and talking to companies out there, both manufacturers and distributors, he made the discovery that 40% of the average company is unprofitable. That means you're actually out there selling, losing money. The only reason you're in business is because 20 to 30% of the rest of the company is so profitable that they can actually subsidize the losses that you're incurring at the other end of the business. Now, how would you know that unless you have a way of measuring it, unless you have a way of analyzing it, unless you have the data that's in the system that's available for you, and unless you have a system that actually makes that data manageable and gives it some kind of logic that you can actually sit down and make decisions from. This other slide came from NAD, which is the National Association of Electrical Distributors. It was a study that they completed last year, and basically what they're showing here is that a typical distributor in their industry is doing business on 3.3% margins. The high profit firms in their industry, are running on 6.3%. Doesn't allow for, there's not much room there for error. There's not much room for guessing. And if you don't have the right tools, the only way you're going to go is down. And you can see actually that some of the high profit firms were down, then they went back up again. Now they're dropped a little bit. There's a study actually taking place right now to figure out why. And the typical firms, as they say, the blue ones, well, they've actually been increasing a little bit as they go forward. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of the new technology and new software that they're starting to adopt and put into place, because in that industry especially, they've been running with antiquated manufacturing systems that have been modified, homegrown systems, and no systems at all in some areas of their business. So it's been hard for them to manage it, but they're heading in the right direction. One of the needs that they came up with is they said that if they're going to have any kind of information that they can manage, it's got to be integrated information. It's got to be a full package system. It can't be bits and pieces of a package. You can't just have pricing management, but then not have the chargebacks or the supply chain collaboration or a proper order entry system in order to make sure that that's tied together. And we're going to see a small example that I have on one of my slides. All of that has to work together because everything works as a cog. And one has got to fit into the other, has got to fit into the other in order to make the cogs move properly. That's what a lot of companies in that industry have discovered, that they need to make that happen, and they need to make it happen across their process. Otherwise, everything they're going to be doing is going to be informal versus whatever they thought they were doing. And what really hurts them the most is that they don't have all the information at their fingertips, and because of that, they can't get the reports that they need. So what you're looking at there is one integrated solution, one full solution, one solution that handles the whole business. If you don't have that, you don't get the information you need. If you don't get the information you need, you can't make the right decisions. It's absolutely impossible. Even if you were to assign resources to do it, they won't be able to pull out all the information you need in a timely manner, and that analyzes all areas of the business that are required to make that decision. If we go to the next slide, you're going to see that our idea of advanced supply chain software is not bits and pieces. We take all of AX, and then we go to areas in AX where it needed to be extended. And we looked at areas like advanced revenue management, with trade promotions, cost to serve. Again, we're talking about making sure that our margins are there. Price protection, sales programs, price coordinator, role center, advanced commission management, bid management, deduction management. You got to look at the full spectrum for revenue management in order to get the information you need in order to manage that revenue. Then it goes into advanced order management, where you're looking at order entry, or counter sales, you're looking at credit checking, order blocking, left to qualify, so that you can maximize the value for your customer, but also make sure that you meet the levels at which you give the discounts, not at lower levels, because then there's no value in it for you, because usually those discounts are tied back to an agreement that you have with a vendor for vendor support. So you don't want to give a discount that's not being supported at the other end, because that'll affect your margins. Lost sales tracking, duplicate order check. Duplicate order checking sounds really simple, but if I double ship, there's going to be a cost, because I either have to go get it back and the customer won't pay for it, or I'm going to have to give the customer a deal for him to keep it. Both cases, my margins are being affected. And then there's the advanced inventory management, which is how you may want to manage that inventory. Is it going to be vendor managed inventory? Can you work something out with your vendors where you have the inventory, but it doesn't show up on your GL, you're not paying for it, it's not your P&L, and you only pay for it when you buy it. Consignment inventory. Get more business from your customers, get more penetration, work out an agreement where you have inventory on their side, automate the process, and minimize the costs. Therefore, your margins are still there. But the decision is made based on you having that information, the right information. Advanced landed costs, that's becoming more and more important as companies are not only trying to build out a supply chain functionality, but they're also trying to figure out what the costs really are. When I'm trying to make a decision between nearshore, offshore, onshore, I've got to have the true landed cost. If I don't have the true landed cost, I am not making the right decision. And that could be caused, the true landed cost could be affected by anything that you can imagine, from having to carry more inventory to having to pay for all the costs that you're incurring for brokerage and transportation and everything that goes along with it. So you need that type of information. So what you're looking at here is a total solution that now, together with the AX solution and their capability on the enterprise side, has become a full formal process that can replicate your company's processes. Not an informal process where you have to jump in and fix the information that's not there. This is a formal process that brings a lot of information to you, captures a lot of data, as you can imagine, but then on the next slide, with our advanced business intelligence and analytics, you'll see that we've got all these reports that come out of the system, and I'm going to show you on some slides coming up, what some of the screens will look like, some of the gauges, where you, as a user, can walk in and first thing in the morning, turn your system on, and the gauges that are important to you pop up. And it could be on filled orders yesterday, and it pops up. And if it's red, you got a problem. That's an exception you got to go deal with and find out why it's red. If it's green, don't worry about it, because keep looking at the other gauges, and you might find one that's in the yellow or that's in the red, in which case those are your exceptions. That's what you need to deal with. That's what management is going to come looking for. Back orders by customer, item, group, and vendor. Well, if all of a sudden my back orders are in the yellow, I better go figure out why. I mean, it's not critical yet, because it's in the acceptable range in some cases, depending on how you set up your gauges and your report requirements, but there's a problem, because it's not green. So why don't we deal with it now rather than when it's in the red? Let's go find out what's happening. Are my vendors shipping late, therefore causing some back orders? Am I not capable of getting the products out quickly enough, therefore do I need more resources? Is the level of back orders being caused by a lot more orders than we're getting, therefore our forecast was wrong? So all of a sudden it starts pointing into so many different areas that you can go deal with as a professional manager and come out with a resolution that makes sense and minimizes, again, the loss of money. Because if it's an increased forecast, increase demand, adjust your forecast, and avoid all the costs of having to go out there and rushing products in, where you're paying extra to get UPS as compared to, LTL and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of opportunities where you can actually protect your margin and increase it rather than losing on it because of the way that you have to deal with that situation. Order to cash. Most people look at order to cash and they say that's more order to cash, and that's fine. But as far as we're concerned, if you're a distributor that has a lot of the issues, some of the issues that we discussed anyways, but most distributors have all the issues we discussed, that's not how you're going to realize your margins. How you're going to realize your margins is by, first of all, planning. Set up your campaigns. Set up your programs that you have with your vendors. Set up your spas. Set up all of the agreements that you have in place between vendors, customers, and so forth. Put them in a system that can manage them. Put them in a system that then turns around at order entry and recognizes all of these agreements that you have in place. So there's no, the formal system which you may have in place now, which says, if it's an EDI order, I got to go check because my EDI doesn't take into account all the agreements that I have with these vendors and customers for these items on these dates, for these quantities, and this discount. So it removes the need to have people do that, and now you can reassign those people not to look at that as the norm, but to look at the exceptions rather than the norm, and then fix those exceptions. So now all of a sudden what you've got is data that's being captured and compared and actually being converted to something that makes sense to you. You go to the approvals, you go into advanced inventory management, so it could be from a VMI location, it could be from a consignment inventory location, there could be so many areas. Again, information is being captured for you and being made available in a way that you can then analyze and maintain and protect your margins. It gets shipped, you get customer payment. Well, your margins aren't realized because now the system, with its intelligence, with its BI capabilities, its analytics, and also what's already been programmed into the formal system, the formal approach to your business says, okay, now I got to go back to my vendors and I got to get the money they owe. And then the system has to be able to pull out the necessary reports, not just to do the formal stuff, which is send out an invoice, get paid, or you may want to do it through AR, which is a negative invoice, and get paid, and so forth. So we have a variety of ways of doing that, but also then look at everything again with BI and analytics and say, well, wow, this vendor doesn't pay us on time ever, so it's affecting our margins. This other vendor always has a reason not to pay us, even though we supply all the information, because my system has it. So it's totally traceable, and we make it available to them, and they still keep coming up with reasons why they're going to be late on their payments. Well, that affects my cash, that affects my margins, and therefore I'm going to go renegotiate with them and see if we can fix this and how we're going to fix this. So the next slide basically says, how can I make my margins higher? Like I just ended this part of the part of that terms with vendors and customers. If I've got the information at my fingertips that tells me, with this vendor was supposed to be 4% and I'm only getting 3.5, and this customer should have been 12%, I'm only getting 10, then there's something I need to deal with. And I have to have the system that's capable of telling me that. Address the exceptions as they occur. As I find out that there's these discrepancies, now I can go out there and not only voice my concern to either my customer, my vendor, or my internal people, but actually have the documentation and information to back it up. So they're going to pay attention to it. They're not just going to say, you had nothing better to do today, so you're coming over here and causing some problems. No, I've got the documentation. Here it is, and we have an issue. That kind of work also allows you to prioritize what you're going to do, which makes you a lot more efficient and also affects your margins because you're going to go after the biggest stuff first and work your way down. It allows you to review, revise, renegotiate, track important analytics real time. I know there's a lot of distributors that say, I've got to ship a certain amount per day. If I don't ship that amount per day, I'm not going to make my numbers at the end of the week and definitely not at the end of the month. Well, if the report comes back the next day and you're in the yellow or the red, you got to go figure out what happened. It could be that it's just a big order that's going out and it's going to take 2 days to go out. Well, the question still becomes, did I fill up half of my shipment containers, and can I fill up the other half today? Or it could be that my guys fell behind on one day, now they're going to try and catch up the next day, so now I'm going to have overtime that I have to worry about potentially, and that's going to affect my margins. So as you can tell, everything basically affects your margins. So you got to look at improving your efficiency, you got to look at spotting areas for cost savings, and it helps you identify new business opportunities as you go in there, because you can find out that a customer only buys from you when they need a certain service to go along with it. Maybe you can couple the service in the product at a small margin increase or whatever, but it's worth it to the customer. Therefore, all of a sudden you get more penetration in that customer. Supply chain visibility. Why? Well, there's customer expectations, vendor expectations. We talked about that earlier. Value add pressure, change management, collaboration. You've got to have that visibility in there, and that visibility's got to be available in the supply chain. That's why you need the analytics. That's why you need the business intelligence, because you need to meet those customer expectations. You need to meet vendor expectations, internal expectations. You've got to be able to overcome the competitive pressure and be successful. You got to know what type of value add you're adding, where you're adding it, why you're adding it. You got to be able to handle change management, because every time you do something like this, something's going to change. And then, of course, collaborate all that information across. I have a small report here that basically looks at cost to serve, because that's one of the areas that's so important to most of our customers, especially distributors. Basically, and if you go back to the Islands of Profit and the Sea of Red Ink, what they're saying is you should sit down and look at your customers. Why are these products, why is this part of your business losing so much money? And in a lot of cases, they found out in that book that the biggest customers, your best customers, the best customers as defined by top line revenue are actually the ones that are bringing in the less as far as margins. Because over the years, you've set up so many agreements, so many discounts, employees, your salespeople's commissions, and you ship a certain way, you give discounts on freight or don't charge them, or you give special services to them that they don't get charged, that when you had all that, you realize that this is one of those items that I'm losing money on, even though this is one of my largest revenue drivers. So something's got to be fixed, and you got to have the kind of report that allows you to pinpoint those areas and by order and by line item as to what it is that's causing those issues. So cost to serve is one good way of using business intelligence and analytics. These are some of the screens that you could have, the gauges that you could have on your screens when you walk in the morning. And if you're, depending on which location you're in, where you find yourself on those colors, you may have some exception management to do. You may have some fixing of the informal system to do so that it becomes formal, and you don't have to worry about handling exceptions in that area again. So these are some of the areas that maximize your efficiency, but also maximize your returns and improve your profits by managing these areas and by doing it by exception. That's extremely important. Some of the results that are going to come out of here is basically, I always like to ask people what's in it for me. And that's usually what everybody asks. Because if you're going to ask me to do something right, well, I want to know what's in it for me. Well, what's in it for me is going to be margins, obviously, right at the top up there, because margins are the lifeblood of the company. If we don't make money, we're not going to stay in business very long. Improve customer service. That can help my margins, of course, because the happier my customers are, the less prone they'll be to go to competition. Increased amount of orders, I might be able to increase my margins by negotiating something with the vendors, where they'll do some vendor support. Become a value-add partner, brand commodities. In the next few years, there's a lot of articles that have been published by Modern Distribution Management, by NAED, by the Wholesale Association, that basically say if you're a commodities partner, your lifespan may be very limited. Well, how do you change from a commodities partner to a value-add partner if you don't know your customers are looking for, if you don't know what your vendors are looking for, and if you don't know what's causing you to be a commodities partner, where people only call you because you're the cheapest? So you're going to have to fix some of your processes in order to add value, and you can't do that if you can't see what those processes are that you have to look at. Increase your existing customer penetration. Customer service usually can result in customer penetration. Increase market penetration. Word of mouth. I love doing business with these guys. Maybe I should try it. You should, absolutely. Simplify your customer's business experience. If it's part of the formal system, if it's something that happens automatically, then the customer experience is going to be a lot simpler, because there's going to be a lot less questions asked, a lot less reasons to hold an order and have to call them up and start asking questions, a lot less reasons to ship late because, oh, well, we still had something that we hadn't solved. If it becomes part of the flow, part of your business process flow, then their experience is definitely going to be better. Simplify your internal experience. Make your own employees' life a little bit easier by not creating stockouts, by not creating doubles, by not changing orders on the fly because you made a mistake. All those carry costs, by the way, so it all affects your margins. And processes that are auditable and traceable are going to be the result. And anything that's auditable and traceable simplifies things. And when you simplify things, you can actually look at, better margins resulting from simplification of the process. My last slide here basically is a summary. What I'm trying to say is that you can get there from, you can grow your business, you can protect your margins, increase your margins, you can create sustainable processes, you can have competitive differentiation, and you can have proactive collaboration. When you're starting to do that, everything adds back up to the margins. And if you can start managing your margins, protecting your margins, and growing your margins, then that means that you're doing something right. And the only way to make sure that that's a sustainable process that you're putting into place is make it a formal process, and you can only make it a formal process if you can test it on a regular basis, and that would require business intelligence and analytics.